Why? Because the young of today and children of today are going to be the adults when they want to bring this AI connection in full blown. For that to happen, they have to get people addicted to technology to the point where they'll accept it and where it's the most natural thing in the world. I'm coming up 67. I was born in 1952, so I have a compass. I know what the world was like before. People being born into the world now, this is the only world they've ever known. And so, they don't have that compass of what the world was like before. Well, this is the world and technology, and this is how it works. And I know from the time I've lived just how recent this is and how fast it's come in, like out of almost nowhere. And so the first stage is to get people addicted to technology to the point where, at the most extreme, they'll get up in the dead of night and they'll queue, stand in line outside an Apple store to get the first of the new technology. And what they want eventually, and not too distant into the future, is people basically lining up to be connected to AI. In the same way that people in Sweden now are having parties to celebrate someone being microchipped, right? This is all this connects. So the next stage, because the idea is to get in the body, the next stage is to get on the body. So we went from just holdables, we went to wearables, we went to Bluetooth and Google Glass and Apple Watches and all these other gadgets that go on the body now. Even what they call electronic tattoos that are basically microchips on the skin. And the next stage is to go in the body, which is already starting in places like Sweden. And the idea is to take this on, and people like Ray Kurzweil, who is a Google executive. I mean, Google and Facebook are really at the cutting edge of this stuff. People think it's a social media operation only or a search engine only. No. This whole Google group now, which is given the name Alphabet, are absolutely at the cutting edge of this whole AI technology. So is Amazon. Amazon's got contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars with the CIA and the Pentagon for cloud services and stuff.
Yeah, they have massive data services.
Massive, yeah.
The consumers don't see.
So the idea is to take this on. And what Kurzweil is saying, and he claims an 80% success rate in his predictions of incoming technology and when it will come in. But, if you know when it's going to come in, then you've got a great chance of predicting it, haven't you? It's like if you know when a stock market's going to fall because the people you are connected to are going to make it fall, well, you're going to get out just before it falls and you're going to get in just before you know they're going to push it up. I mean, you don't have to be, Nostradamus if you know the script.
But anyway, if this was his agenda, maybe he shouldn't tell us.
Yeah.
Or is it so clever that he's telling us?
No, this is why he's telling us. It's the sales pitch.
Okay.
The sales pitch, and this is why they're being...
We have the illusion of choice that we're going to be a part of it.
This is the sales pitch, and this is why they're telling you. The sales pitch is when we connect to artificial intelligence, we'll be superhuman. That's what the sales pitch is. That's his sales pitch.
Right.
That's going
Siri,
to be the sales pitch.
Alexa, all these things.
Yeah. Well, I'll come to them in a second. They're very, very interesting, very important.
Okay.
So what you've got is the idea that connect to AI and you'll become superhuman intelligent. No, you'll become subhuman intelligent. You'll become a vehicle for artificial intelligence. And whoever controls artificial intelligence will control the perceptions of every mind that it's connected to. And that's the sales pitch, but then that's the reality of what it really means. Now, if you're going to make a physical connection with AI, you're not going to do that on a mass scale until you've made a psychological connection. And there is a process, a psychological process, which is known as preemptive programming. Preemptive programming is this. You're going to usher in a world that is so different, so dramatically different to what anyone's been used to, that you're going to have an obvious resistance purely by the chasm of difference between the world people are used to and the world you're taking them into. A resistance that says, hold on a minute, you want to do what? 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 So you prepare them for it through preemptive programming. You put out a stream of movies out of elite-controlled Hollywood. You put out television programs, you put out books, you put out all these things that basically portray the world you want to take people into. This is why you've seen so many movies about control by robots, control by technology, of synthetic humans, which has the transgender agenda very much a part of it, connected to it. You have the synthetic humans, consciousness going into synthetic humans. You have the dystopian society being portrayed and portrayed and portrayed. And what that's doing, it's making the subconscious, to an extent the conscious mind, familiar with the world you want to usher in. So when you literally start to bring it in, there's not that chasm that there would have been before. There is almost a familiarity with it because you prepared people by portraying it over and over again in movies. And another part of this psychological connection with artificial intelligence, so we'll accept the outcome that I've talked about, is these Alexas and these Echoes and these so-called office assistants or personal assistants. Because people, I've met people who've got one in every room. And you start to interact with them as if they're human. And now they're bringing in internet-connected toys for kids, even little kids, and Barbie dolls that they can actually have conversations with artificial intelligence. They're now bringing in these robots that are these synthetic robots that are looking more and more like humans, a lot of them coming in from the East. And this is a whole psychological process of familiarizing us with artificial intelligence, to getting people to interact with it until it becomes the most natural thing in the world.
Well, is this a positive thing? What if it makes us live better lives? Could it be?
Well, if you want to use artificial intelligence to make things happen in a more efficient way, well, there's an argument for that. But that's not an argument for connecting AI to the human brain and the human perceptual processes, so that artificial intelligence becomes those processes. And I'm not just saying that. Ray Kurzweil says this, that by 2030, the connections will start to be made between artificial intelligence and the human brain. And the human brain will be connected to what he calls the cloud. Another name for this is the smart grid, basically to artificial intelligence. And he says this too, because his sales pitch is it will be fantastic, it will be superhuman, that as time passes, artificial intelligence will be more and more of human thinking and human perception until basically it's the totality of human thinking and human perception, at which point we won't be human anymore in terms of the consciousness processes we are using today. We will be artificial intelligence. And this is the assimilation I'm talking about. And the point is that if you are connecting the human mind to a grid, a global technological grid, that grid can be centrally controlled. It will take at the center point very, very few people to run it, and even fewer to decide how it's run. And where will any questioning be? Where will any process of debate be? There won't be any. There will just be perceptions coming on tap from a central point. Will just be a hive mind. This is the term they're using, the human hive mind. The sales pitch is all minds will be connected, and then we'll all be able to use all the intelligence of everybody's mind, and we'll be able to go into fantastic realms of possibility.
Which could happen. Elon Musk says it will make us better humans.
No, that's the sales pitch. The outcome is you have the human hive mind, everyone connected, which means a central point can control all of them. And I would take Elon Musk more seriously if he didn't come out and say that artificial intelligence could be the end of humanity. And he's right on that, the end of humanity as we know it, certainly. But then start a company called Neuralink to connect human brains to artificial intelligence, and use his company, SpaceX, to put up endless thousands of satellites beaming Wi-Fi at the Earth to create the very cloud of connection that will allow everybody to be connected to artificial intelligence. The sales pitch of Wi-Fi everywhere, every inch of the planet, which is why they're putting thousands of satellites up to beam it at us, so no one can escape from it.
This is 5G.
Well, 5G is a massively more powerful and more destructive level of the power of communication, but the Wi-Fi is necessary to create this, quote, cloud that Kurzweil describes, whereby no one can escape from it, because it will be everywhere because it's coming from space. And without that cloud, you wouldn't have the ability to encompass everybody in this technological reality. But because they're putting satellites up, and Elon Musk is the one putting most of them up, they're being able to create this global Wi-Fi cloud, because the sales pitch, like I said, is, we want everybody to be connected. Yes, you do, here. That's what it's about, but they won't obviously tell you that. And 5G, you bring up a very important point. 5G is a weapon. It's used by the military. Do you know these 5G millimeter wave technologies are used to scatter crowds? They drive up in this technology when they want to scatter a cloud, and they put out these frequencies in a much higher power than 5G will be initially with us, but the same frequencies. And people scatter because they get the feeling their skin is on fire. Because the human body, including the skin, is an antenna. It interacts with frequencies, and it receives and transmits information. At the cutting edge of understanding of DNA, scientists know that DNA is a receiver-transmitter of information. And so we are electromagnetic, electrical organisms, transmitters and receivers of information. When our electromagnetic fields are in balance and harmony, we have health. We have psychological health, and we have physical health. The reason that this technological society is causing so much psychological and quote, physical disease is because these frequencies, technologically driven, and we live in this Wi-Fi world now and all the phone masts and all the rest of it, these technologically generated frequencies are scrambling the balance of the human electromagnetic electrical communication systems. And if you scramble them, you create a state of disharmony, dis-ease, which plays through to physical and mental, emotional, psychological dis-ease. And there's another point to this. The brain processes information electrically. It communicates with the cellular structure electrically. And it operates within a certain band of frequency. If you can broadcast frequencies carrying information, this technology has long been known, carrying information and perceptions within the frequency that the brain decodes information, the brain will decode those frequencies and will have those perceptions. You can externally, even without connection to AI, although that's the piece de la resistance, if you like, that's the kind of holy grail. But even before that, you can influence people's perceptions externally by broadcasting these frequencies that we interact with, because we are antenna.
Okay.
Now, some decades ago, there was a guy who worked out the frequencies of different emotional states. This is long ago. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated now. So every thought, every emotional response is a frequency. It generates a frequency, and it is of itself a frequency. Hate is a frequency, and it's different to love. You know, when you are in a room and there's lots of aggression and conflict and hatred, you feel it. What do people say? Oh God, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife in there. That is because the frequencies of hate and conflict have been so generated, they have changed the electromagnetic field of the room.
Okay, so 5G is going to be weaponized against us potentially.
Yeah, but the point being that they worked out the frequencies of various emotions, including rage and what have you. And basically, they can play across a community these frequencies without anyone knowing, and it starts to have an effect, and it starts to build rage, it starts to build anger, and people might not realize why they're feeling it, but they start to feel it. And then what they do is they trigger that with an event. Maybe some guy is attacked by the police or something, or somebody's arrested for something they didn't commit, and now there's the trigger. The blue touch paper's been lit of this manufactured frequency-driven rage, and you have mass riots and what have you, and people do things that they wouldn't normally do. And you can make people depressed. You know, the American military, they've admitted this. They have technology that fires frequencies at the enemy that basically breaks the enemy's spirit, so they give up and put their weapons down. This is the technology we're dealing with. Now, you take that into account, and then you think of 5G. First of all, 5G doesn't travel well because of the nature of its frequency. So instead of big towers, as we have now, broadcasting these frequencies long distances, it won't do that. And it doesn't go through solid objects, what we call solid objects, very well either. So to overcome that, there are going to be boxes broadcasting 5G, this weapon, down every street, all over the world. You're talking phenomenal numbers of these boxes, broadcasting like on the lamp standard outside your children's bedroom and stuff, broadcasting this stuff. There's no way you'll be able to go where you won't be in a field of 5G. And another interesting thing, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but the story broke, first of all, in Sheffield, when the council started cutting down literally thousands and thousands and thousands of mature trees in urban streets. And there were big protests about it. You know, Sheffield claimed to be a green city, but all these mature trees were coming down, thousands of them. And my brother, he works as a call-out bus mechanic. So a bus will break down, they'll call him, he'll come down and fix it on the side of the road. So he's traveling all the time. And he's saying it's amazing how many mature trees are being cut down. Overwhelmingly in urban places. Now, the worst nightmare, I'm not saying cause and effect, but I'm saying think on it. The worst nightmare of 5G in a street is mature trees, because it can't get through them. They don't want urban trees for 5G because it won't go through solid objects very well at all, and it doesn't travel far. So we're going to have this explosion of 5G transmitters. And then, going back to what I said earlier, and they've admitted this too, there's going to be like 20,000 satellites up there beaming 5G at the Earth. And
this is dark stuff, dude.
it's dark stuff. Why have I spent 30 years taking abuse and ridicule? Because I feel people need to know this stuff so we can head it off. This is not to say, oh, doom and gloom. Oh, God, this is going to happen. Dystopia's coming. Oh, fear. I'm saying this is what the plan is. So let's intervene. There's 7.7 billion of us. There's a fraction of people that are actually doing this. See, the people putting the boxes on the lamp standards and the posts haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're just paid to do it. The people who are telling them to do it haven't got a clue why they're doing it. They're just telling them to do it. And so the hierarchy goes further and further and further into the web until you go into the hidden. And at that point, you'll see where it's coming from. And they know. See, about, what is it, 3 weeks, a month ago, saw a video of, it was a Senate hearing on Capitol Hill about 5G. And this senator asked these representatives of the industry, how much have you spent on independent research into the potential dangers of 5G? And what they said was, nothing. No independent research. Why? See, when you speak for long enough with these things, all the bits kind of tend to connect. They don't want to debate on 5G because they can't win it. So if they had independent research, which was published widely, there would be such outrage against 5G, they would never be able to get it in. So they don't have it. And they admitted this. There was a guy called Wheeler. He was the head of the Federal Communications Commission in America. We're supposed to protect the public from this stuff, from the telecommunications industry. It just so happened that before he became head of the industry watchdog, he was the head of the leading lobbyist organization on behalf of the telecommunications industry. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And he made a speech at the National Press Club in America. Someone else has got the job now, but when he was still head of the FCC, and he openly said, we're not going down the road of regulation with 5G because there's basically too much money to be made, and therefore we're just going to let the industry decide what's safe and not safe. And the industry will decide what's safe on the basis of, what do we want to do? We want to do this, okay, so that's the safe level then, right? Because what they say, this is the scam. Well, it's not dangerous because these are within the safety guidelines. Like 5G is within the safety guidelines. Yeah, because what you do is you say, what do you need to do? We need to do this. Okay, so we'll put the safety guideline there. So although you're doing something extremely destructive for human health and human mental and physical health, we can say it's within the guidelines because we put the guidelines higher than what you're doing.
Okay, so we need to question this, and we really need to be aware about that in the AI piece. Can I ask you about climate change?
Yeah.
And your read on that? Mm-hmm. Big debate right now, global warming, human-made. How do you see what's actually happening here?
Scam. I mentioned earlier an organization called the Club of Rome. Club of Rome was started in 1968, and it's part of a network of organizations. Towards the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, secret society was created in Britain called the Round Table. The first head of it was Cecil Rhodes, who was a Rothschild agent. That's why he went into southern Africa and pillaged the gold and diamond resources and destroyed that society on behalf of the Rothschilds. And he was the head of the Round Table. Then when he died, another guy called Alfred Milner took over, another Rothschild agent. And this secret society started spawning satellite organizations. First one they created was the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London, also known as Chatham House. think tanks. This is what they are. Watch the think tanks, big time. And then they created something in America, which was an American version of that, called the Council on Foreign Relations. Council on Foreign Relations has, to a very large extent, driven American foreign policy ever since to this day. Then came the Bilderberg Group in 1954, formed at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. Then in 1968 came the Club of Rome, and then came the Trilateral Commission in 72, 73. Now, the Club of Rome was created specifically to use the environment as an excuse to transform society. And I've been writing about this for a long time. And basically, you say, to save the planet, this has to happen. And to save the planet, it's a globe, therefore we have to have global centralization of power to save the planet. And so the Club of Rome has been one of the big drivers of human-caused climate change, or the illusion of it. And then came a United Nations agenda called Agenda 21. And that laid out a strategy for transforming society to meet the challenge of climate change. It was everything that they wanted. And then later, more recently, they've advanced that, and they call it now Agenda 2030, which is an updated version of the same thing. And when you read Agenda 2030, it is a tyranny's dream, because it dictates every area of human life, including education, to save the planet. And this is problem, reaction, solution, as I call it. And this has been worked towards for a long time. So you create the illusion of the problem, and then you offer the solutions to the problem, which is centralization of power, centralized control. Now, bringing it up to date, one of the most classic Soros progressives around today is a lady in America, a congresswoman, she's recently elected, called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's classic, nothing to do with facts, just this is how it is. And she's just come out now, and it's got a lot of coverage in America, a lot of support in the Democratic Party, called the Green New Deal. Because she says, I would say bizarrely, and scientists would also say bizarrely too, that we have 12 years to save the planet. We had a few years to save the planet some years back, and it long passed, and we're still here. And what her Green New Deal demands is exactly what I've been writing for years, is the plan to transform human society into a centralized dictatorship on the justification of we have to do this to save the planet.
And we don't need to save the planet.
No.
And humans aren't causing an aggressive form of global warming.
No, the planet doesn't need saving. I mean, its natural balance mechanisms will kick us off before it needs any help.
But are we going to harm ourselves more in the meantime?
No, I've just been reading. See, it's a psychological game. So you have a major weather event in the 1950s, and it's a major weather event. Oh well, that was a bit extreme, wasn't it? You have one now, global warming, it's climate change. And I've just been reading a very, very interesting book by an American meteorologist called Joe Bastardi, who is, since he was a little kid, he was obsessed with the weather. He just loves weather and weather forecasting, and he's just really kind of obsessed with it. And he was observing all this. And being obsessed with the weather, he's looked at charts going back forever, And he's looking at all these claims about this is global warming, this is climate change. And he's going, well, hold on a minute. That happened in the 1950s. That happened in the 1920s. And what he does in this book is he shows the repeating cycles that cause the outcome. So in the 1920s or earlier, there is a cycle where the Atlantic cools and the Pacific warms. There's another cycle where the Pacific cools and the Atlantic warms. And that has a knock-on effect that eventually reaches a weather outcome. Now, he's pointing out in this book that when this sequence happens today, the outcome is, that's climate change, we're all going to die. And then he goes back in his book and he shows that in the 1950s, the 1940s, this same cycle happened, and the outcome that he's now blamed on climate change happened. I mean, you know, the planet today is nothing like as warm as it was in what they call the medieval warm period, when there was no carbon dioxide emissions from technology. I mean, you know, what caused it then? Turbocharged handcarts? I mean, it's crazy. And the other thing is that we went from this really warm period, the medieval warm period, about 1,000 years ago, and then we came down into what they call the Little Ice Age, which is still portrayed today on some Christmas cards with people skating on the Thames, when temperatures became very, very cold. And there's a correlation between the two, which I'll come to in a second. And then we started coming out of the Little Ice Age into the present day. And a lot of, you know, they say, this is the warmest day since records began. A lot of those records began, well, we're still coming out of the Little Ice Age. So the comparison between then and now is completely unsupportable. Have you noticed that whenever they're talking about the climate and climate change and global warming, they never mention the bloody sun. They don't mention it. It's all carbon dioxide. But by the way, without carbon dioxide, we'd all be dead. It's what gives life to the planet. And another, by the way, 98% or thereabouts of greenhouse gases, which are supposed to hold the heat in, or do hold the heat in, is water vapor and clouds. And when you see the graph, there's water vapor and clouds. Here's carbon dioxide. And the vast majority of this carbon dioxide is naturally generated, not human generated. And
what about methane and all the ones by animals?
Yeah, but they're tiny,
right.
tiny,
but
tiny.
It has a big effect, though.
They're even less. I mean, what are we do? Going to kill all the animals? What are we going to do? Legislate against condensation when 98% of it's caused by water vapor? It's ridiculous.
So it's another scam to get people's attention to create control.
But like I was just going to say, they never talk about the sun. Now, it's well known that solar activity, these great emissions of power which we experience as heat coming from the sun, you can see when the sun is in an up period of, if you like, power by the number of sunspots. Because these sunspots are massive projections from the sun that are bigger than the Earth, well bigger than the Earth. And they travel through on the solar wind and we get them as heat. And so when the sun is very inactive, there's very few sunspots, sometimes virtually none. And these have been looked at in their cycles through this period that I'm talking about. And when we reached the minimum, the bottom of the Little Ice Age, when it was at its coldest, it's known in climate science as the Maunder minimum. And it's named after a guy called Maunder, and his wife was there as well, who were charting sunspot activity and its relationship to Earth temperature. And they picked up a correlation. And one of the correlations was that when there was virtually no sunspot activity, we reached the coldest point of the Maunder minimum, the Little Ice Age, as they call it. And then sunspot activity started again, and we started to climb out of this little ice age into present day. So when you discount basically the impact of the sun on temperature, your climate models are irrelevant. Irrelevant, because the basic foundation factor of what dictates the temperature of the planet, the flipping sun, is not taken into account on anything like what it should be to get an accurate projection of what's going to happen. Then you look at this from the point of view of prediction against experience. According to Al Gore, well before now, there should be basically no ice in the summer at the North Pole. Funnily enough, there is. And this should have happened, and that should have happened. And another thing that Joe Bastardi points out in his kind of lifelong love of weather is that we're told that all these extreme weather events now are increasing because of climate change. He's saying they're not. They're not increasing. There were more tornadoes and hurricanes way back than there are now. And there were more extreme weather events than we have now. But because it's a psychological game, if you keep saying every time, notice what they've done now in Britain, which they've never done before, they've started naming storms. Like they name hurricanes, which are kind of not very often, so you just name a few. They must be running out of names. Because every time there's a storm that you would call, it's a bit more than, it's going to be a bit rough, they give it a name.
All right, so it's another psychological tactic.
It's more scary.
All right, so we need to ignore it.
Well, what we need to do is to research ourselves beyond the official narrative. And if we do, we'll find an amazing thing, that there are a lot of scientists, increasing all the time, by the way, who are saying, actually, it's not happening, is it? It's not real, is it? There's many, many scientists now that were on the bandwagon, it's happening. We're now saying, well, actually, I'm reassessing it. I don't think it is now. I don't think this is real. And all that is available if you search for it. But when you've got a situation where the BBC, that's supposed to be this neutral organization, well, it's the way I tell them, that actually made a decision that the science is settled, therefore we're not having people on that are saying otherwise, then what you're doing again, back to the same theme, you're skewing the debate. Because all people are hearing is climate change is real if they don't go searching elsewhere. Climate change is real, we're all going to die. You are disgustingly, mercilessly frightening young children of the devastation and the horror that they're going to face for a political agenda. That's what's happening. So and the school, I mean, my son, Jamie, because he thinks for himself, when he was at school, and he had an exam, and part of the exam was climate change, he was obviously going to put that actually there's evidence to say that it's actually not happening. And his teacher said, well, I have sympathy with that, but if you say that, you won't pass, right? So again, wherever you look, where there's an agenda you can't win, you don't have the agenda, or you don't have the debate. So what you have now is anyone that is questioning the official narrative of so-called global warming, climate change, and it became climate change, by the way, when the temperatures leveled out and they couldn't call it global warming anymore. They're now climate deniers, which is obviously psychologically linking to Holocaust deniers, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you only hear one thing, that's overwhelmingly going to be the perception you have. Okay. And if you say to people, well, why do you believe that climate change caused by humans is real? They'll say, well, Well, everybody knows that. Well, everybody knows that because that's all everyone's ever heard. When you go and do the research, you find actually it's a house of cards. It's just based on repetition. You know, go and research. The 97% of scientists believe that global warming is caused by humans. Go and research that, and you'll find if you follow it back, it's based on wind. It's based on no substance whatsoever. It's a complete hoax, but it's a great line. Oh, 97% of scientists agree that it's caused by humans. Oh, well, if 97% of scientists agree, it must be true. You chart that number back and see where it came from. Even the Wall Street Journal trashed that.
Okay.
But it's still parroted all the time as justification for transforming human society, destroying beautiful landscapes with wind farms that are incredibly inefficient, and so on.
Let me move on to money, because money might have been the pre-internet way of controlling the population. What do you tell people to do with their money, how to be aware of money, and how is money used in a similar way as a psychological tool?
Well, money doesn't really exist. It's a theory. If you look at how the world's been acquired, it's been done by a banking scam where you lend people money that doesn't exist. We call it credit. And you charge them interest on it. And if they don't pay the money back plus interest, then you get their wealth that does exist. You get their home, their business, their land, their resources, whatever. And we've been through a process of banks lending credit, figures on a screen, greatly in excess of what they have as assets, called fractional reserve lending. And then when they can't pay it back, because often the banks have taken actions that have crashed the economy, like in 2008, the banks then get all the things they've lent money on, the real wealth of the world. And what's happened in this process of lending credit, getting the real resources when they can't pay back the credit, has sucked the wealth of the world, the real wealth of the world, into the hands of a very, very few people, and left out there most of the rest of the population with something called money. And money only buys anything because we take it seriously. You know, if it's just a piece of paper, and this is the point, it's meant not even to be a piece of paper, it's meant to be purely electronic. And so we have this fresh air money that is worth something because the buyer and the seller believe in it, and only because of that. And the real wealth of the world has been sucked into the hands of a very few people by lending this scam called credit. Another interesting thing about this money situation is when you go to a bank and you say, borrow £50,000, they'll type into your account £50,000 in credit. Where's the credit come from? Here. But you're not paying back £50,000. You're paying back £50,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal. Because people think that governments create money. Money is overwhelmingly created by private banks issuing credit. That's how so-called money comes into circulation. So what this means is creating credit for the principal but not the interest, is that at no point is there ever enough money, credit or otherwise, in circulation to pay back all the debt and all the interest on the debt outstanding. So people losing their homes and their businesses and their resources, etc., is built into the system on purpose. Now, when there's an expansion of the money supply, an expansion of money in circulation, Peter paying Paul, that seems, to hide it to an extent. But once you squeeze the money supply, you take money out of circulation, it becomes obvious that there's nothing like enough money in circulation to pay back all the debt. So there's people losing their homes, their resources, their things that they own, for no other reason that there simply is not enough money for everyone to pay back the debt. So what do the banks do? Ooh, we'll have that. And this has been going on for centuries, and they've hijacked the real wealth of the world by doing this. And the next stage, which is in my books from the early 1990s, is the cashless society. You know, I was pointing out, purely by knowledge of what this agenda was, that they were going to get rid of cash. And look at it. Cash is flying out of circulation. In some places like Sweden, it's almost totally cashless. They're shutting down bank branches, so you cannot interact with a bank branch locally with cash. You have to do it online because that's electronic money. And eventually they're going to take cash out of circulation. Why? Because when you go into a store now or anywhere and you give them a credit card, electronic money, and they say, sorry, the system won't accept your card, well, you can still pay cash. But when there's no cash in circulation, your electronic money, which is meant to go through a microchip eventually, when they say the system won't accept your microchip or your card, you have no other means of purchase. So whoever controls the system is dictating whether you can purchase or whether you can't, whether you can eat or whether you can't. And the only other alternative to that would be barter. And I'll tell you what the plan is. The plan is to ban barter, to make it illegal on the basis that they can't tax it. So that's along the line as well.
How does cryptocurrency play into this?
Well, what is cryptocurrency? Cashless society.
Yeah.
Now,
and created by a private institution, another currency created by a private institution.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there couldn't be good things with things like Bitcoin and stuff like that, as long as cash stays in circulation. That's the key.
So you have an anonymous option.
Yeah.
Really.
While cash is in circulation, you have other points of or ways of purchase. Once there's no cash and you have only cashless digital currencies, then whoever controls them controls everything. And not only that, they can wipe your bank account. If you're a dissident to the system, as this moves on into more extremes, they can wipe your bank account. And it's just gone. Because all it is figures on a screen. You can wipe figures on a screen in a second. You can, from a central point, crash the entire economy by controlling digital money and digital processes. And the idea eventually, problem, reaction, solution, create the problem and then offer the solution, is to have a gigantic crash, which they will instigate. And then to overcome the crash, they will propose a totally new economic system of central control to be the solution to the problem they've created, which is crashing the economy. And the more control they have over money digitally, electrically, the easier it is to do that. And cash is flying out of circulation. Why are they taking ATMs away in large numbers? So you can't interact with cash anymore.
It's easier not to use cash.
Yes, and you know, when you're going around and you a credit card, that can be useful, a debit card, that can be useful. But only when cash still exists. When cash disappears, and it's, like I say, it's disappearing so fast, what is now useful becomes a form of total control. And that's what it's supposed to be going, because, you know, this is the point. You're not going to sell a tyranny by telling people it's a tyranny. You sell a tyranny by selling the tyranny on the basis of things that people might think are beneficial. And by the time they realize actually what the game is, it's a tyranny and there's no turning back. And this is what we're seeing in all these different areas. By the time the penny drops in the great majority of people that human-caused climate change is a hoax, society will be transformed and irreversible using the excuse that it's real. Same with the cashless society.
So all roads lead to hell here, David.
They do, but if you think they lead to heaven or lead somewhere, okay, you're gonna take that road. Oh, you're not gonna resist being pushed down that road.
So we need to question everything.
When you realize where it's going, which is the whole point of my life, really, then you can say, hold on a minute, we ain't going there. And that's the point. And that's why they're trying to shut me down and people like me down, because they don't want people to know what this outcome is planned to be. Because if billions know what the outcome is, the few are not going to force those billions to take that outcome anymore. That's why they have to keep it quiet. That's why they're shutting down debate. That's why they're lying to us on a monumental scale.
So you want us to question everything, challenge everything. That's what we need to do. We need to all wake up as individuals and start being part of this debate, everything that's happening around us. Is that really what you want?
Yeah. Instead of taking people's word for it, including mine, including anybody's, certainly including governments and corporations and media, if you haven't got time to research it for yourself immediately, then put it into neutral. Don't believe it or disbelieve it, but don't react as if it's true. Just put it in neutral until you've had time to check it out for yourself. And when you do, you'll realize invariably, as I did, that the official story, the official narratives are invariably either completely, most of the time, total lies or overwhelmingly misleading. And crucial, because of what we were talking about earlier, don't be intimidated into silence. Don't. Because if you silence yourself, eventually everything goes silent. When people are telling you what you can't say it louder, say it more often. And if people around you don't like it, well, find another circle of friends then. Because there are more and more people that you will find if you look for them, because more and more people are awakening to this. And like I said earlier, you can get